Good evening, everyone. Welcome to LSE Public Debates event today. Today, we are very proud to be hosting the Palestinian ambassador to the United Kingdom, Mr. Husam Zomlot. His Excellency Husam Zomlot is head of the Palestinian mission to the UK. He is a Palestinian diplomat, academic, economist. Before his appointment, he served as head of the PLO's mission to the US. Zomlot has researched at Harvard University and worked as an economist. Among other notable achievements, he has also worked at the United Nations Special Coordinator's Office in Palestine. As a former alumnus of the LSE, we couldn't be more excited to host him tonight. Today, chairing the event shall be Dr. Lloyd Gruber. Dr. Lloyd Gruber is the former dean of LSE's Institute of Public Affairs, an established expert in international and comparative political economy. Dr. Gruber has held positions at the University of Chicago, Brookings Institution, and the Massachusetts Institute of Technology. The format of the debate shall be as follows. After this speech, I shall give Dr. Lloyd the pedestal. He shall come up and explain equity guidelines. After this, Mr. Zomlot will come up and address the students. After the address is over, Dr. Gruber shall engage in a conversation with His Excellency, after which we'll open the floor for questions from the students. Please keep your questions under 45 seconds. Please do not engage in back and forth. And if you have more than one question, please raise your hand and a volunteer will come up and give you your mic. With all of that, I would like to give the floor to Dr. Gruber so he can come up and explain the equity guidelines for the event.
Hi, everyone. Thanks for coming, for being part of this continuing debate, and for raising questions, for challenging views, for celebrating free speech, for furthering the core mission of the LSE. So for some of you, this is an emotive subject and you feel strongly about it. And so you should, that's okay, that's good. But to make this work, we need to be understanding of others who are here or who are watching and are part of our wider community who may have different views from you. So to that end, I've been asked to read through, I mean, they're on the screen so you can follow along, but a set of principles that were drafted, not by me, but by you or by the LSE Student Union. So that's what I'll do. So as you can see, the first principle is if you feel unsafe for any reason, there are members of the LSE Student Union here to whom you can have a private discussion, and that will be fed back to the organizers all anonymously. The second principle, I don't know if it's a principle, it's a statement that you should be aware of your privilege and take a step back so that other marginalized people can lead. You should believe people's accounts of their experiences of marginalization and honor people's vulnerability by not disputing their lived experience, keeping in mind the previous principle. So that was the third principle. The fourth is very important. No form of harassment, abuse, or incitement is tolerated at any time. Please communicate respectfully. We ask that if anyone is experiencing any form of hatred or abuse, to please report it to the LSE via Report It, Stop It, that website, or if you're here with us this evening, inform a member of the LSE Student Union staff team on site. So these are the principles I've just laid out. They're intended to apply to all. They were written in recognition, I should say, by the LSE Student Union in recognition of existing power structures that continue to marginalize certain groups. The Student Union stresses, should be kept in mind throughout. These are parts of the LSE Student Union's equity policy. And for further details, I guess you could scan that from afar or just go to the LSE Debate Society's Instagram. So I think the next order of business is to invite you to deliver a few remarks, then we'll have a conversation and we'll open it up. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Professor. Good afternoon, everyone. I very much like your social distancing techniques and skills, just leaving a couple of places and congregating together. That's LSE for me. It's really a pleasure and a delight to be here today to speak to you. In fact, it's a pleasure to be back to my school, alma mater. As some of you may know, I did study here, MSc in Development Studies, back in, too far, many years ago, 1999 to 2000. We did not have all these high rises and beautiful glass. We only had the George, the pub, and they started putting some small elephants in the middle of the square. I was told they're still there.
Yeah. Were your classes in the George too?
Yeah, but that was the most modern building at the time. I very much loved coming here, my friends. I loved the atmosphere. I loved the research. I loved the quality of the teaching. I loved the many, many friends I made here from all over the world. And I mean all over the world. I think we were 140 students in my program from dozens of countries, dozens of countries. I was even standing in a queue just at the beginning of the academic year for registration and enrollment. And I had to ask if anyone was English in that queue. Just one person raised his hand. Wesley has been my best friend since then. It was a real privilege, my friends, for me to study here, as I hope you know it is for you too. This is a world-class institution, and you are benefiting from a world-class education. Now, I hope you will also benefit from our talk today, and I look forward to some searching questions from you. First, though, let me thank the LSE Debate Society, Shahir and your colleagues, and the LSE Student Union for organizing today's talk. And also let me thank Professor Lloyd Gruber, LSE's academic chair, who will kick off today's Q&A session. And I had the absolute privilege of meeting him earlier and hearing his fascinating academic and professional career, all the way to Palestine and Gaza. One of the great joys of being at a university like this is the access it gives you to people who are actively grappling with some of the world's biggest, most intractable problems. And I understand that the professor and his colleagues here are among those who are always thinking, deliberating about the world's intractable issues, problems. Now, you may think Palestine falls into this category. And in some ways, you would obviously be correct. After all, it is 104 years since the Balfour Declaration, when Britain promised Palestine away without consulting us, the land's native population. It has, and it was, a classic colonialism in its disregard for the rights of an indigenous people. And that disregard continues until this very day. Palestine is also a subject that dramatically agitates people's passions, as you know very well here in this campus, everyone has an opinion about Palestine, sometimes more than one even. What I would like you to take away from today's talk and discussion are just two things, only two things. First, however unlikely it may seem right now, there are reasons for optimism, my friends. Don't think it is all hopeless. I will return to this point, to this point later. The second point I want you to take away, somewhat related, is that while the issue of Palestine has lasted far too long and continues to arouse great passion, as well as pain and suffering, especially to the Palestinian people, it is really not particularly hard problem to solve. It is not a hard problem to solve. If we see this as a question of rights, rights denied, answers readily appear. In other words, if we understand the issue of Palestine as one in which an indigenous population has been denied the rights to self-rule, to freedom from oppression, to statehood, and to equal standing, then we can begin to see what a solution looks like. Now, there are some who believe that this is a zero-sum game. Oh, we studied zero-sum game a lot at the LSE at the time. We used to call it Destin, my program, and they broke my heart. They told me it's no longer called Destin, Development Studies Program. I still receive emails, destiners, about us. But now there are some who believe that this is a zero-sum game, that one side's rights negate the others. For too long, that maximalist narrative has been allowed to dominate. But in fact, my friends, fellow LSE students, there is absolutely no reason we have to understand the struggle that way. On the contrary, there are two ways in which we can ensure that everyone's rights are upheld. Everyone. We can either live as two equal states, side by side, or we can live as equals in one state. That's it. That is it. Everything else is a zero sum. And my friends, I am not here to advocate for one outcome over another. In fact, this focus on outcomes and solutions is part of the problem. The world has been so focused on the outcome that they have forgotten the present, the now, the current reality. It cannot be that while we are trying to reach some agreed outcome, our rights are also frozen. Wait until a final agreement. All that means is that the peace processes for more than 30 years have become a substitute for having our rights upheld. Substitute. And that means a situation in which an entire people is living without the kind of rights that everybody else takes for granted, including you. The right to self-determination, citizenship, a proper passport, the right to your own property and land, the right to live where you were born or where your family is from, the right not to be detained arbitrarily without trial or even charge, the right to love and marry who you want. You know, this is a right that is denied if you have fallen in love with the wrong person. If a Palestinian woman from Ramallah or Nablus decides to marry a Palestinian man from Nazareth, they cannot live together. The right to move without military checkpoints or concrete walls, the right to work. Nevertheless, my friends, for more than a quarter of a century, the Palestinian leadership has been engaged in a two-state process based on international resolutions, international legitimacy, to create a fully sovereign state in the West Bank and Gaza Strip with East Jerusalem as its capital. Palestinian refugees, now numbering more than 6 million, scattered in and around Palestine, including your speaker here today, should be able to exercise, we should be able to exercise our internationally sanctioned right of return. We remain committed as Palestinians collectively to this outcome because we remain committed to international legality, to the international order, to the international system. We have been since the 80s, the 1980s, when the PLO, the Palestine Liberation Organization, was persuaded that such an outcome, a two-state outcome, was not only reasonable. You know, the two states on the 67 is 22% for Palestine, 78% for Israel, was not only reasonable, but it was also legal. And I see international lawyers here. And would enjoy the support of the international community. That was the argument in the 80s, and that's exactly why the PLO and the Palestinian people, the Palestinian leadership, opted to ally ourselves with international resolutions, for we want to ally ourselves with international legitimacy, with the law, the power of the law. But my friends, therein lies the rub, as Shakespeare might have put it. Therein lies the rub. In fact, the commitment of the international community is lukewarm at best. It has seemed that way a long time. Right from the beginning of the Oslo process, Israel continued building the illegal settlements in occupied territories, even though such settlement building is clearly defined in international law, not only illegal, but considered a war crime. After all, you are not building homes on land that you expect to vacate one day. You build homes in occupied territory to lay clear and lasting claim to the remaining 22% of historic Palestine. Thus, Israel's settlements are a de facto annexation of occupied land. It is a de facto annexation. So all those who say that we have put annexation on hold, I have some news for them. But Israel never faced sanctions for such gross violation of basic international provisions. On the contrary, my friends, the only pressure ever applied to Israel was in the form of inducements. Stop expanding settlements and we will sign a bigger and better arms deal with bigger and better loan guarantees for longer than ever before. That's what the international community kept offering. In other words, have a carrot or have even a bigger carrot. That was the diplomatic approach to Israel since the beginning of the peace process, at least 30 years ago. It remains the diplomatic approach to Israel now. Let me give you a recent example. In November last year, just a month and a half ago, Israel and the UK signed a strategic partnership, a 10-year trade and defense pact. The deal includes many arenas, but it includes closer cooperation on cybersecurity. Even though Israeli spyware has been used to spy on British citizens. There are no strings at all on Israel in this pact or any pact, not even in the form of inducements. In other words, the UK is committed to pursuing trade and arms deals with Israel regardless of the fact that Israel is in clear contravention of international human rights law, and perhaps more importantly, in this very context, is acting in contrary to the UK law and policy. Sheikh Jarrah is a point in case as well. The UK requested only 3 days ago that Israel not to proceed with the forced evictions of Palestinian families, the Salhiyya family, if some of you are following what is happening in Sheikh Jarrah. And the Salhiyya family home is just next to the UK Consulate General in East Jerusalem. The UK government clearly requested that Israel not to proceed with the forced eviction of that family from their homes. They have been there for generations. The UK even sent its Consul General, our friend, to the area in show of solidarity. Yet, early Wednesday, yesterday, in the early hours of a very cold, stormy morning, the Israeli army moved in to evict the family and they demolished their home. Israel clearly pays no heed, my friends, no heed to what the UK wants and has no fear of any consequence. Why would it? It never suffered consequences before. Will it suffer any consequences now? I regretfully doubt it. And I'm saying the UK because I happen to be the ambassador to the UK. But the UK, in word at least, also remains committed to a negotiated two-state solution. Every morning, every evening, this is the UK position. Two-state solution in accordance with international resolutions. But Israel has openly refused to pursue a peace process and is continuing to refuse negotiations today, even after Netanyahu. We have the 3 no's by the new prime minister, not very new anymore, Prime Minister Bennett. No to two-state solution, no to negotiations, no to meeting President Abbas. And Israel is just as openly making a negotiated two-state solution impossible. Live on TV, obviously by continuing its illegal settlement project. And still, the UK is willing to sign off on such a 10-year commitment. 10 years. So, and it will be renewed. But reminds me of the Congress bill's commitment to Israel in 5 years, 10 years. Such an unconditional, even love has some conditionality, reciprocity. Now, if you are an Israeli politician, what would you learn from this? I would suggest that you learn that talk of just resolution and international law from many countries, including the UK, is merely that. Talk, backed by no substance and no political will. And you don't need much by way of diplomatic education or experience to understand that such an approach is bound to fail. Absolutely. Every one of us would like to have the cake and eat it too. Every one of us will behave in such a way if we can get away with it. That's the human nature. It's not because they are Israelis or we are Palestinians or we are British. This is how God created us. There is the law and there is the enforcement of the law. No matter how much the law is there, if there is no police to implement the law, nobody will heed. So this approach is bound to fail when it comes to inducing Israel to take difficult decisions. It has failed in the past, and my friends, it will fail again and again. There is no surprise here. What is a surprise is that the international community, and I here mean most of the West, including the European Union, the UK, the US, persist with what is clearly a fiction. That they support a two-state solution. They support a two-state outcome. It has to be a fiction because if they were serious, their approach would change, immediately would change. With all that has happened, it should be absolutely clear that Israel will not come to its senses unaided. Just because they are nice or we are nice. I'll repeat this. With all that has happened, it should be absolutely clear that Israel will not come to its senses unaided. Israel, in fact, is behaving precisely like you would if you believe this is a zero-sum game. And it is not as if the path ahead for international actors is somehow unclear, obscure. It's very clear. 3 things can be done right now to salvage the two-state outcome they espouse. And all of these would be reasonable actions and entirely in line with international law. Completely. Number one, recognize the state of Palestine. You call for two states, recognize the two states. If you only recognize one state of the two states, then you're not serious. Then it's almost a license for that one state to encroach, which has been the case. Recognize the state of Palestine. More than 2/3 of the world nations have recognized the state of Palestine. Every day, the UK and other countries wait on that very important commitment to peace. Is that they lost to settlements and illegalities and further distance from the destination we all want to reach. Number two, sanction illegalities. That's a responsibility of all international contractors to international. Sanction illegalities, ban all settlement products. You say they are illegal. It's the UK that says they are illegal. And when we discuss it, they say, oh, we label them. So we say these settlements, these products are produced in settlements. You don't label ivory products. Illegal products are banned. States don't label. States decide if this is legal or illegal. So when they label, they throw the onus on you. So customers have to decide if they want to consume this illegal product. And also, we need to think seriously about companies, British and international companies that work in these illegal settlements, ban them, sanction them. And we need to think about arms trade to be in line with the UK law. And the UK law is very clear about not exporting arms if it ends up in violation of human rights. And number three, and finally, in this regard, be part of an international peace efforts. The UK has a historic responsibility. The UK has a very unique position of having a very good relationship with America, with Israel, with Europe, with the Arab world, with us, with Israel. Be part of an international effort to implement international resolutions, not negotiate them. Law is not to be negotiated. You don't sit and negotiate our right to self-determination. That's not negotiable. Nor negotiable our right to return. What is negotiable is the modalities to achieve these very clear principles. And we're absolutely flexible in discussing the modalities of implementation of the right, but not negotiating the right itself. But none of this is happening, my friends. Instead, all we see on the ground is ominous, if I may use that term. Israel freely continues its settlement expansion until yesterday, and the world keeps condemning, expressing concern, asking Israel and urging Israel to stop all settlement expansion, including the Foreign Office yesterday. Fine. But Israel continues to demolish homes like yesterday and every day, evict people from their homes. It continues to arrest people left and right under military powers, often without charge or trial, in what is known as administrative detention. At this very moment, several prisoners are on hunger strike as we speak. Hunger strike to protest their administrative detention. A detention, you know what is this? The administrative detention. It's a leftover from the British colonial rule, which really has no place in the modern world. It's a piece of illegal law, really, that they can round anybody and they can keep them in prison without charging them or taking them to court. Out of 4,600 Palestinian political prisoners, we now have 500 who are being held without charge or trial. And their sentence or their imprisonment could actually be extended indefinitely. 160 are child prisoners. Child prisoners. Israel also continues its ethnic cleansing of Jerusalem to lay sole claim to the city, as happened only yesterday. Holy to all three monotheistic religions. Jerusalem is not but to be holy to all religions. It has recently designated 6 globally respected Palestinian rights groups as terrorists in an effort to stop them recording and documenting its crimes. Also, of this, why does Israel do all this? That's the question. I think the answer is very clear. It does not want to end the occupation that began in 1967. So the world has to get it, and it can. Israel has total impunity. This is catastrophic, of course, for us, the Palestinian people, but it is also catastrophic for the post-World War II global order, the rules-based order that we've created together as a human family to regulate relations between nations. And it is catastrophic because the message is clear. What is the lesson here? The lesson is, with the right friends in the right place, you can do whatever you want. You can simply do whatever you want. So, my friends, you may ask then, by way of concluding, what is the reason of my optimism exactly? Why am I optimistic after all that? Didn't I tell you at the outset that I am ultimately hopeful? And I am. And it is not only because you have to be positive to be a diplomat. No. You can be hopeful, but not delusional. The reason I am optimistic is because of you. Truly. You, yes, you here, right here, the students of the LSE, my alma mater, and the youth of the world. Because it is you who will carry this burden moving forward. And I am quite confident, absolutely confident, that you and those like you are better equipped than perhaps previous generations to deal with this issue. Why? Well, let me first say this. As we saw in May, just last May, when Israel was trying to kick people out of their homes in Sheikh Jarrah in Jerusalem and was bombing Gaza, the issue of Palestine can still galvanize all over the world. Tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands. I was amazed what I saw in London during that time, and in Manchester, and in Glasgow, and in places you would never hear about, and beyond, of course. And not just here, as I said, the struggle for Palestinian rights, my friends, continues to resonate deeply and widely around the world, including in the United States. And what is happening there is absolutely inspired by the younger generations, the progressive, from across the communities, and the intersectionality, the linkages, the Black Lives Matter, the change in the Democratic Party, the progressive forces. These guys, you are way more self-confident and sometimes aggressive, but in the right way. We can be, our previous generations are too nice, timid maybe sometimes. And why is that? I think primarily why the world is arousing and passionate about Palestine. Primarily because it is a patently unjust situation. Patently unjust. Clearly unjust. In your face, unjust. We as human beings abhor this kind of obvious injustice. We all do. It goes against a very fundamental sense of fairness and equality. The idea that all people are equal, should be treated equally and have the same rights and the same responsibility to respect and uphold those rights. I also think Israel's arguments are no longer convincing anyone. Just look at Emma Watson and look at the Israeli response when someone objects to racism and the only response from those accused is straight out of basic spin 101, I am not a racist, you are a racist. That's a spin 01. I'm not a racist, you are a racist. Then we can see that the tide is turning. Indeed, Emma Watson was quickly backed by many of her fellow stars, Hollywood stars, movie stars, cultural gurus, indicating that this line of argument is no longer working. Khalas, as we say in Arabic. Enough. Finally, my friends, I believe that pure transactional politics, politics devoid of ethics, has reached an end. And in part because younger generations no longer accept it. We are facing a global existential climate crisis. And I was in Glasgow in COP26, and I was hit in my face and in my heart about the crisis we are in altogether. The severity, the seriousness, the existential side of it for all of us. And we are also in a global pandemic that has impacted us all. Local answers are no longer enough, my friends. Local answers are no longer enough. Short-term answers are not enough. We need global attention, global movements, global politics, global solutions. And that's why we need to save our global system to these crises, including the Palestinian issue. And we need solutions that may well ask some sacrifices from all of us. No one will be, win-win. No one will win it all, and no one should lose it all. And we are absolutely capable as a human family to create a win-win for all. And a global solution demands some kind of global ethical understanding that includes a fundamental commitment to one word: equality. Equality. And that is all the Palestinian people is seeking, to be treated equal to all other nations, all other people. And we have a younger generation of Palestinian activists who speak your language fluently. I'm sure you follow some of them on your Twitter and Instagram, and I forgot the other, TikTok. And they are speaking to a younger audience around the world for whom this message is not only unquestionably right, it is the only possible way forward for all of us. For these reasons, my friends, I am more and more believe that we must be hopeful. I believe we are reaching a South Africa moment in Palestine. Then as now, politicians of all stripes did not want to take a clear position. It was global public outrage like yours, global solidarity and public mobilization that changed the political calculations and forced an end to South Africa apartheid. That mobilization was led by young people, by artists, and by those for whom equal and global human rights were not merely talking points to win elections. Today, we are those young people. You are those, no, we can't say we. You are those young people, and the more of you join the struggle, the faster it will end, and the sooner justice will prevail. Please keep up your fight for a better world, my friends. Continue your solidarity with Palestine, because yes, as Emma said, solidarity is a verb, it is action. Remember, Palestine is not a divide between right and wrong. I'm sorry. Remember, Palestine is not a divide between right and left. It is a divide between right and wrong. Thank you very much.
Okay, so I'm aware of the time. This is I want to kick off with a little bit of conversation. We've already been having a conversation, but we're both eager to hear your questions, so I'm not going to take too much of the time. I thought it was very powerful remarks, and they had a theoretical core running through it. I'm a student of international relations, and there was a lot of IR theory in your talk. The emphasis quite explicitly was on the international environment in which you operate and your cause is situated. The onus, perhaps this is putting it too simply, but the attention in your talk, the onus is on the international community to get with the program, to rally on your side. A lot of attention on the global dimension, but that takes the focus away from what's happening on the ground in Ramallah, in Gaza, with Fatah, with Hamas. So I guess maybe I'll just keep it with one question, which is, what do you think needs to happen, if anything? Perhaps nothing needs. What needs to change in the Palestinian movement to potentially mobilize the international community? Is there anything that needs to happen differently? And just to put a point on this, so Abbas was elected in 2005 for a 4-year term. That was 17 years ago, and there has not been an election since. So I'd be really eager to hear, curious to hear. There was an election scheduled very recently for April that was put off. I'd be interested to hear your views on why that was, and whether, if there is an election, that would advance the cause. Perhaps it would set it back. It would create greater polarization. Could that election be a tipping point, and in the sense of bringing the international community to bear in the way that the anti-apartheid movement helped, as you rightly mentioned in the case of South Africa? So the short version of the question is, do you need to change anything internally to elicit that kind of response that you're hopeful will eventually, when all of you are making power, will eventually happen? Is there any way to expedite the process? Is there something you could do, your movement could do internally?
Thank you very much, Professor, for this question. Of course, my focus is the international arena for 2 reasons. The first is who I am and what I do. I'm an ambassador. I work in the international arena, and my focus is there. I am biased, of course. But the second reason is that I am in the international arena by choice, because I believe that the Palestine-Israel issue is an international issue. It was started by international powers. I'm sitting exactly where the country that has really started this whole thing by promising our land. And Britain did not only promise our land in the form of a letter sent by the Foreign Secretary Balfour to Rothschild in 1917, but actually 2 years later, Britain took over Palestine, became a mandate, and literally oversaw that process of creating the State of Israel. And since then, I think this is not Corona. Since then, this is abuse of my cords. Since then, this conflict has been primarily fueled, sustained by either direct intervention and interference by international actors, or actually the lack of. Israel would not have been able to do what it has done without the US. Absolutely. And while I recognize that the internal Palestinian dynamics are paramount, and while I believe that elections are absolutely crucial, not for international purposes, I assure you the international community care less about that.
You think?
I think. I mean, those who make decision making. They are not. This is not what they obsessed about. It is for primarily a Palestinian consideration. The Palestinian people deserve the renewal of our democratic process, deserve the renewal of our legitimacy, deserve that they are consulted regularly. And we must convene it, absolutely. But the argument is that if we do better elections, if we do better this or that, then things will change, is not valid, in my opinion. It's not valid. Because up until 2006, who used to convene elections regularly? Yes, Arafat was elected by the Palestinian people, even though he was the father of the movement, the father of the nation. Yet, as you may remember, he was besieged in his own compound and killed effectively. So while we have a lot to do internally vis-a-vis Fatah and Hamas, regaining unity and Gaza, convening elections, making sure that we have exemplary governance in Palestine, because if you want to have your self-determination and if you want to have a state, it better be a state that you are proud of, not just another state. Yeah, I don't want just another state of the Middle East. I want a very special state that respects our citizens wherever they are, and I think I speak on behalf of all the people. But this is the last question. This is the last thing. The linkage here, the causality needs to be thought about very carefully. We need an international momentum to recreate the political dynamics that will actually allow us to focus on what matters, which is the internal dynamics. Forgoing that will always make the internal dynamics unhealthy, because we had to defer elections because Israel thought it can pocket Jerusalem during these elections, and we will not allow during the time of Trump to do so. I can go on until the morning, but we have a homework to do. But one of our most significant tasks now is to create an international momentum that will help both of us change the reality, so we embark on internal journey that can actually create a blast in the positive sense between the two sides and between the region. And a Palestinian should not say the word blast, but I say it.
Yes. That's very clear. I think in the interest of time, let's open it up. I have some other questions, maybe they'll come up. So I'm not sure, you'll select them, and remember to keep them short, and you might also want to—
Short and sweet.
Short and sweet, or maybe not so sweet. CLSC, not so sweet. But you might also say who you are, very, very briefly, if where you're a student. You can select. Okay, gentlemen. Yes.
I'm I'm a third year law student at SOAS. You're another alma mater. I had an interesting question about when the Sheikh Zayed theater, ironically, with the normalization of ties between Israel and the Arab states, and you speak about the international and building momentum. But within the Arab world, there seems to be a change in tide in terms of Israel being largely accepted. How do you see that changing in the future? And something that was so important to the Palestinian cause was the Arab world, and that completely changing towards the other direction. What do you see the future in that sense? Thank you.
You had to ask that question.
If he didn't, I would have.
Well, number one, I would like to assure you that while there are some changes in some regimes and some rulers, make no mistake that there is no change as far as the Arab people are concerned. If you ask any Emirati or Kuwaiti or Omani or Saudi or Egyptian or Jordanian or Algerian or what have you, Moroccan, the relationship with Palestine is beyond politics. It's not politics. It's kinship, it's identity, it's history, it's civilization, it's many things, it's blood. There are some changes and we disagree with them. We disagree with the way they are conducting their relations for the following reasons. Number one, there is and there was and there remains to be an Arab unified position about making peace and normalization. It's a pact that was offered to Israel called the Arab Peace Initiative, and it was approved by all the Arab states and also the Muslim states, the Islamic states. So you have 75 countries who promised to normalize relations with Israel instantly once Israel quits its occupation of Arab land. And a two-state solution has achieved, or a final agreement has been achieved. To deviate from that unified position weakens the unified position, number one. And number two, it takes away a major incentive for Israel to actually go in that direction. And let's be frank, one of the main incentives for Israel is to make peace with or normalize relations in the region. So if you actually do that while Israel is actually occupying land and colonizing and destroying and demolishing and besieging Gaza and what have you, then I think you have not helped the cause of peace in the region. So while we realize that this has considerably undermined our efforts. We still bank on the first factor, the Arab people, and we still also bank on some sort of revisiting of this position. Because since these countries signed normalization agreements with Israel, Israel has showed them in the face that these normalization agreements will not stop their settlement enterprise, will not stop their annexation, will not stop their project in Jerusalem, the complete control of Jerusalem will not stop anything. To the contrary, since the signing of these agreements, these illegal practices have quadrupled, have been really unprecedentedly high. So we are hoping some dynamics would actually bring us all back to our senses and make sure whatever we do for the cause of peace, for the cause of incentives towards peace, not just for narrow, short-term considerations that actually might end up hurting all of us.
Okay, other questions? Let's get you, sir.
I swear I don't have corona. Yeah, first of all, thank you very much for being here, Husam. As you quoted, the illegal settlements as well as the Nakba are and were war crimes committed by the Israeli regime and are still happening to this day with no consequences, with the settlements being quadrupled in the recent days and months. In the beginning, it was mentioned that this was a continuation of expressing the right of free speech at LSE and the Debate Society. In the beginning, in November, the Debate Society invited your counterpart, Hotoveli, to quote-unquote debate on the issue of Palestine and Israel. And Hotoveli, your counterpart, stated quite famously that the Nakba, the ethnic cleansing of 750,000 Palestinians, was and is a very strong and popular Arab lie. When serving as settlement minister in 2020, she said following about the settlements, this land is ours, all of it is ours. We did not come here to apologize. She further stated about Palestinians that they are thieves of history and that there is no Palestinian people. How do you think a debate on essentially the Palestinian right to exist is beneficial in the Palestinian struggle for liberation and has anything to do with the expression of free speech or the expression of own opinion, if this opinion is denying the existence of current or former LSE students? And that's my question. I'm from Germany, born in Lebanon, and yeah, my name is Ali.
Ali, and from Germany and born in Lebanon? My God. Yeah. God help you, my friend. Ali, thank you for your question, and allow me not to really comment on what the Israeli ambassador has said. This is for her to decide. But I just want you to know that a big part of what has happened to us is not just the actual physical war against us, the armies and the shellings and all that happened throughout the last 70 years, but the war of words. And regrettably, over a course of 70 years, there has been a group that arguing that case and winning some arguments in some places. The whole thing started with the notion that Israel is a nation without a land, in a land without a nation, like Palestine never existed. And this is exactly why I ended my talk by saying how optimistic I am, because the narrative is big. Our narrative is gaining momentum, is the credible narrative, is now the mainstream. And this has taken us a long time, a long time. I didn't learn the Nakba from books, or I learned it from my own father and grandfather because they were subjected to it. I was born myself in a refugee camp to the very south of Gaza in Rafah. I am the product of the Nakba, physically, literally. Your student colleague is the product of the Nakba. And my grandfather took me to his home that he was forced out of in 1948. So I know his home, I know his fig tree, I know where he used to pray, I know where he used to work. So she can say whatever she wants. But our existence could have been challenged many years ago. But today, our existence, at least in the narrative, is absolutely written in stone. That's number one. Number two, they try to also challenge our political existence. Took us some time, but we snatched our political legitimacy from the jaws of the world. And now I speak to you as an ambassador, a representative of the Palestinian people in London. That didn't come out of nowhere. That came out of generations of real struggle until we really forced ourselves on the international arena. Yasser Arafat in 1974, not one country on the face of earth, including the US and Britain and others, would challenge our political existence. Not just our peoplehood, but our political representation. So such talk does not help. It will not take us forward. And I assure you, it is in the losing end, not in the winning end.
Okay, other questions? Yes, you. Yeah. I'm looking at you. Yes, just wait a moment.
You. Okay, so thank you very much, Ambassador, for a very thought-provoking speech. My question was, since you said you believe that political mobilization of our generation might help bring about a two-state solution, do you worry that since the Israeli government has so far largely ignored pressure from the international community, that further mobilization might cause them to be more aggressive in undermining Palestinian rights?
Can I just piggyback on this question to ask whether, when you talk about the Israeli government, it's a new government. Things have changed. Netanyahu is not the prime minister, he's the former prime minister. And Ambassador Hoteveli is no longer the settlements minister, and the President of the United States is no longer Donald Trump. So do you think things have eased at all in the last 6 months, the last year, given this broad church coalition that is currently governing Israel?
Yes, and first the question about would Israel become more aggressive given the change in the international public opinion? And I think regrettably, yes. The answer is yes, and it's always darkest before the dawn. Always. The darkest moment of the night is just before the dawn. And I feel we are approaching that darkest moment. And when I see the behavior, the absolute easiness at shooting at people and at checkpoints, what happened in Sheikh Jarrah only yesterday morning are indicators of that aggressiveness, that viciousness, that violence, and that message that we don't care. We don't care what you say, what you at the LSE say, what the world is saying. We are going to do as we wish. But hopefully that will also feed in more, both the Israeli public opinion and the international public opinion, that this is simply not going anywhere. This is not going to, it's senseless. Also, we have to assume that there are many Israeli people that are sensible. And then they would want the same things we want. Ordinary life, normal life, taking their kids to schools, to movies, etc. And in the end, there is no horizon. And I tell you, strategically speaking, Israel is facing a huge existential questions. This is not just about international public opinion. It's about the local domestic dynamics. They have forced 2/3 of our nation, 750,000 were 2/3 of the Palestinian people at the time. They have forced us out of our homes. Only few thousands remained in the 48 areas, what became Israel, and the rest scattered around the West Bank and outside. Now, 70 years on, there are 6.7 million Israeli Jews inside the historic land of Palestine, and there are 6.9 million Israeli Palestinians. So we are even more. Because it doesn't take much for us to actually sustain, withstand, stay, multiply. And allow me to brag here. We are a nation that is ancient, very well rooted, have a very beautiful culture. We know how to cook, how to make embroidery. You know, an entire army of soldiers will not be able to make one Palestinian thobe. It takes generations and millennia of mothers and grandmothers. We know how to farm our land, and we know how to persevere. And therefore, okay, another 50 years, 70 years, and then what? And then what for Israel? It doesn't take us much to exist in our villages all around, but it takes so much for these illegal settlements surrounded by barbed wires and tanks and what have you, and special bypass roads and choppers and helicopters to protect them, and, you know, freakish control system. This is not sustainable, my friend. It's not sustainable. Israel is facing a demographic death if it doesn't wake up and actually heed the way of a compromise, of a win-win. They cannot have it all. It's a big thing to chew. And this is from my heart. And that's why I think the international side is key in this equation, because both of us need tapping on the shoulder. As for no Netanyahu and no Trump, of course, Trump and Netanyahu were the worst combination you could ever have. I was the victim of Trump. He closed the office when I was the ambassador in Washington. Actually, not the victim. I'm enjoying London, and I have him to thank for coming here and coming back to my alma mater. But the new administration in the White House and the new Israeli government, you know, especially Mr. Biden, have delivered some very good promises, but he did not carry out any until now. Nada. Not reopening the consulate general, which was there since 1840. So long before Israel was created, long before the conflict. This is a historic thing. Not reopening our office that was closed, not doing much of the list that they promised to do. Obviously, the administration has other priorities. And sometimes dealing with a Trump, and you know, he is just like a ball in a china shop, is easier than eating with somebody who is so moderate, but you want delivery, but it's not being delivered. As for the new Israeli government, I don't know what to say, except that the maximum they could offer us via their engagements is what they coin as economy for security. And this is unacceptable. They think that easing our life is a favor. It isn't a favor. And they cannot bribe us. Our rights are not for sale. And we do have economic rights, Professor. These are not economic peace, as they coin it. So they will allow us to work in our own land and farm our own land and move in our own land in exchange of security. So this is the new peace for them. So unfortunately, I wish I have good news to report for you. The only difference is that the new government is liked and loved by the West. They have the same policies in terms of settlements, Jerusalem, Sheikh Jarrah, Gaza, what have you, but they have a face of some figures like Gantz and Lapid, who are considered to be progressive, centrist, liberal. So London and Paris and Berlin and Washington, they just want to embrace the new government. I hope that embrace is going to actually deliver something substantial. The new government is sitting on a very delicate sort of coalition. I don't know if they can actually go in any political direction. And it is headed by Naftali Bennett, who was himself the head of the Yusha Council, which is the settlement council in the West Bank. There are some elements within the government that does say, you know, things that are within the hopes that I've said in my remarks. And I hope these voices are going to be the actual decision makers soon.
Okay, I'm going to studiously avoid looking over at Shahir behind me because he's going to tell me we're out of time or we're past time. So what I'd like to do is take 3 questions rapid fire. You don't need, in fact, I'm sure you won't have time to answer all three, but it would be useful just to hear them, and maybe you can pick the easiest, pick the hardest. You, ma'am. Yeah.
Hello, my name is Ines and I am Lebanese. So my question is, one of the arguments of the other party is that Palestine, before the start of the Israeli occupation, was not an independent state because of the English mandate, and that therefore their actions were and are still fair, in brackets. What would you say about that?
Okay, that's one. You got that? Way up at the top. You, yeah.
Hi, so you mentioned that the international powers don't seem inclined to act and give any consequences to Israel. Why do you think that's the case? And if that's like the real issue, surely you have to get to that before any youth mobilization might impact that and be of benefit.
Okay, let's move down here. You, sir, for the third. I have a quick question at the end. So, okay, but then one more. We'll go for four. You, sir.
Thank you, Ambassador.
Oh, I'm sorry. Yeah, first, let's hear your question, and then after. Okay, go.
As a senior member of Fatah and a senior diplomat, you reaffirmed your government's commitment to the two-state solution. But recent investigative journalism and recent polls show that a lot of people call for the reunification of entire historical Palestine. And they say that the two-state solution is more of a compromise and not an exercise of their right to self-determination. What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah. Okay, and you, sir.
Hi, I'm Grisha. I'm from Russia, and Professor already mentioned about Abbas being on a 16-year-long four-year term, and I myself from Russia know a bit about presidents serving a bit longer than they should, and it usually comes with some corruption as well. And there have been accusations, such as your colleague in the Fatah group, Mohammed Dakhlan, who estimated net worth of 120 million, or even Mahmoud Abbas himself, who flies on a $50 million private jet, all while the Palestine population lives 60% of them under the $2 poverty line. And I guess my question from this is, how can the Palestinian people prosper if the leadership is deeply authoritarian and corrupt?
Good. I'll start from the end, my friend, from Russia. Of course, corruption is such a plague and needs to be fought hard, and not, particularly by people like us, who, as you said, are seeking, freedom, emancipation, seeking to build a state of their own. You better build a good one. There is the phenomena of corruption, and there is the perception about it. And I think the perception is being also used for political reasons. The reality, there is corruption everywhere in Palestine and in the region and beyond. Particularly not in the form of stealing money. We have systems that are, I would invite you to actually visit, that are among the most transparent in the world. Our budget is online all the time. The US will not be paying the budget of the PA if there is no such very prudent international monitoring and auditing by the World Bank. And I think we might be the only country, either on earth or in the region, that actually put our auditing online. So I doubt that there is such corruption in terms of stealing money. But there is what we call in the Arab world wasta, something we have to get rid of and fight, i.e. nepotism. And really using your status or your power or your relations to get your relatives and people into jobs and positions. And this is there, and we have to fight it, and we have to find ways to actually at least reduce it to the maximum possible. But I fear, my friend, that a lot of this exaggeration, billions, I mean, we don't have oil. We have olive oil, I must say. We have olive oil. So we have to be really realistic in what we say. A president needs a jet, and I happen to have traveled in that jet, and I assure you it's one of the smallest jets I traveled in. And, you know, I would go with the president from Washington to Amman in our time. And really, it is a very modest one. And when I see the pictures and the propagation about it, I say, I wish I saw that plane. I didn't see that plane. But I think part of that is also an argument that is advanced by some Israeli politicians, because they want to say to the world and to their own constituencies that we are being oppressed because we are corrupted. We are being oppressed because we cannot govern ourselves. We are being oppressed because we mismanage ourselves. So we brought it upon ourselves. I'll tell you a couple of examples. Please hear it and take it to heart. Number one, we have achieved in the last 15 to 20 years the lowest illiteracy rate in the region. In the last also years, our people have become, go back to the UNESCO statistics, we are one of the highest per capita PhD graduates worldwide. There is a lot of investment in the human capital, in the infrastructure, in our hospitals, in our schools. The money is not going to the pockets of the people. There might be a couple of those who are, you know, bad apples. And there has been some cases of, you know, public prosecution. But the real source of corruption, the actual source of corruption, is a military occupation that does not allow the people to actually build a future of their own. As for the question about there was no Palestinian state before Israel was created. There was no state in the region, in the entire region. The entire region was colonized. Colonized by Britain, by France. I don't think Germany has done any. Did Germany colonize anybody, my friend? No. So this argument is very silly, because no one has a state. Independence started to be gained in the entire region in the 40s and the 50s and the 60s. And you know what? Even the 70s. Countries like Emirates, Kuwait gained their, maybe Kuwait earlier, I can't remember, but gained their independence after I was born. So this is not a solid argument. The main argument is that, is there a land called Palestine? If you go back many decades, many centuries, you will find out that there is. Even the British mandate before the creation of Israel have passports for us called Palestine. Is there a Palestinian people? Oh, we produced almost every prophet, my friend. We have too many of them. Sorry to be. Yeah, it's a burden sometimes because everybody wants a piece of our land. So the hell yes, we have such a very strong nation called Palestine. Do we have rights like the others? Yes, we do. And then the discussion is over. Well, there was a state, Jordan was in the West Bank, Egypt was in Gaza. Don't care. We have our land. We are a people, very ancient, and we have a political system and a political governance that represent us. This is and we have borders. This brings me to the issue of Palestine historic, from the river to the sea, and there I will conclude. There is, and I know the professor might have taught his students some of these concepts, notions, theories. There are two concepts in the notion of justice. There is the absolute justice, and there is the relative justice. For us, the Palestinian people, absolute justice means that we regain the entire land of Palestine, the historic land of Palestine, because it is ours. The home that my own father and my grandfather were forced out of is our home. We should get it back. That is absolute justice for me. Relative justice, however, is where you do not want to inflict on your opponent what they have inflicted on you. And I belong to the second. And I think the majority of the Palestinian people belong to the second. Yes, there is somebody who actually physically lives in my father's home now, as we speak. Or maybe others, not only mine. My father's home was destroyed. but he lives in a Palestinian home, somewhere in Haifa, somewhere in Jaffa, somewhere in Akka, somewhere in Nazareth, somewhere, whatever you want to name it. And it's been 70 years. And in these 70 years, there is a young man of 14 years old who were not even part of that. Do you want to also take him out? So we are in this dynamics of trying to find a formula of relative justice. Here comes international. And here comes international resolutions whereby they found a formula of a two states on the 1967. I go with that formula. For I think that piece of land is too small. And in the end, once we gain our independence, which is a necessity, it's a necessity. Because we are not only seeking civil rights, we are seeking national rights, collective rights. We are not just individuals, we are a people, a nation. Once we do that, we could agree with our neighbor to open borders like the EU, you know, we can exchange, you can live, if you are Israeli and wants to live in Hebron, if you are Palestinian and wants to live in Tel Aviv, should be fine. However, the demise of the two-state outcome would automatically lead to what you just said. Because if we cannot agree on that, then most likely we will have to accept to live in a one state without having to carve, as I said in my introductory remarks. I hope we can reach a two-state outcome soon, simply because I think a two-state outcome would get us to some sort of arrangements that we should not carve the land, but share the land. And if we go into that apartheid and one-state reality situation, I am afraid it will take us many years of more suffering. So it will prolong the situation rather than bring it shorter. The bottom line and the end here is that we as Palestinians are not interested in seeing anyone suffering, but we no longer accept that we are the only people who suffer. This must end. We accept the compromise, but we are not to be pushed around and people think we can compromise more. They need to understand that the 67 borders is the maximum we could offer and the absolute minimum we could accept. This is the compromise and the deal. And short of that, we are going into the direction you think we are going into. Thank you.
So my name's Abhijit, for those you don't know. We want to thank His Excellency, Mr. Zomlot, on behalf of the LSE Debate Society for giving up his time, his effort, his energy to come here and make these incisive, powerful, and often incredible remarks regarding his country's perspective and position on this often fraught issue. We stand by and we commend all of our speakers incredible opportunities, incredible opportunity for them to be able to speak to us and convey to us a unique perspective, which often we may not be able to access if it wasn't for, if it wasn't for the fact that we were at a world-class leading institution and the facilities that the LSE does grant us in this regard. As part of this, we wish to thank Dr. Lloyd Gruber for being so excellent in helping chair both of our events thus far, and we wish to say that we consider our series on a new era in the Middle East to have been vital in pursuing our mission to allow LSE students to be able to challenge, talk, and explore about these often critical issues in the same room as influential policymakers. As such, we invite the students to give another round of applause to both our chair and the ambassador. And also, on behalf of the Debate Society, we wish to present a small token of our appreciation to both the ambassador and Professor Lloyd Gruber for giving up their time here today. Thank you.
It feels like Valentine's Day. These begin on the 14th.
Thank you. We ask all students to remain seated while we escort the ambassador to the next secure location. Mr. Ambassador, your security team will.
Mr. Ambassador, leave.
Thank you very much. During the process of which we ask everyone to remain seated, please do not move, and then we will pursue the next set of instructions once we have secured the event.
Thanks.
So, I got it. Please stay seated.
Okay, you guys can leave through that exit, please. The one on my right.